Welcome to another episode of the CarryTrainer Higher Line podcast. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the CarryTrainer Higher Line podcast. We've got a cool guest on today, UFC Hall of Famer Pat Miletich. Very cool to have you. It looks like you're hanging out in the backyard in the waning summer sunshine here.
Good old Bettendorf, Iowa, man. Thanks for having me on.
Bettendorf's like right on the river, isn't it? Or pretty close to?
Right next to Davenport. It's called the Quad Cities. It's part of Bettendorf and Davenport, Iowa, and then Rock Island and Moline, Illinois. And Dan, you can go back to a Dan Aykroyd Saturday Night Live sketch where he's Ralph Malifarkle III. And he's a male gigolo, and he services the entire Quad City area.
I don't live that far from you. I'm probably 3 hours east of you, Northern Illinois. Just on the other side of Rockford. So
I feel for you, bro, being in Illinois right now.
Yeah, it's not so awesome. I go to your area quite a bit. One of the guys that I kind of apprenticed under in the shooting sports was a police chief in Comanche, Iowa. That's not far from you, is it? Comanche?
No, it's not. It's just up the river from me.
Yeah. His name was Bob Housingay. He's retired now, but
okay.
Yeah.
Yep, I remember the name
for like about 100 years, I think.
Right.
Yeah. So for folks that don't know you, which would be weird, but there's plenty of people that listen and view this podcast that did not pay attention to UFC or fighting, that maybe have other backgrounds. Tell folks a little bit about you, and I'll fill in the blanks where you don't.
Well, I mean, I grew up here in Bettendorf, Iowa. I traveled the world for, as an athlete, as a coach, as a broadcaster. I've seen enough of it to know that there's only a few places that I really would want to be. And I do love Iowa. The people here are very, very good people, good work ethic. It's a river town. So it's kind of a mix of the farming mentality and the iron worker type, blue collar worker type mentality. So it's a good mix of people, hardworking people. And for the most part, very, very honest people. But I grew up, in Bettendorf, especially Iowa, but Bettendorf was always a powerhouse in wrestling. So I grew up wrestling and playing football. In Bettendorf or in Iowa in general, the bad wrestlers go out for basketball. Those are the fourth string wrestlers a lot of times. But went to college for like a year and a half. My mom got sick with heart problems. Came back home. My oldest brothers, or all my brothers, my sister, were all married, had families. So I left college, came home, worked 3 jobs, taking care of my mom, and that's when I decided I was going to fight. That's how I got into it. I was pouring concrete, and my foreman, who was from Kentucky, was a black belt in karate, and said, "A karate man will destroy a wrestler." And I said, "You haven't been in Iowa long, apparently." And so during our lunch break, we went out in the field, and I didn't beat him up or anything. I just took him down and slapped him around a couple times.
Probably just double-legged him into the dirt.
Basically. But, the cool thing was he gave me a pass to go to his kickboxing and karate gym. So I went there, and they had me doing high blocks, low blocks, mid blocks, all that stuff. And I had boxed when I was younger and grew up wrestling. So it really wasn't my speed. I wasn't into it at all. And then Friday, my last free lesson, and I got done with my free lesson, and I said, "I'm out of here. This is a joke." And he said, "Hey, the black belts are sparring tonight. You might want to hang around." So I stuck around, and they were getting after it. I mean, they were banging hard. And I said, "Okay, I could, yeah, all right, I'm signing up. This is why I'm here." So I signed up, got a fourth degree black belt in Shorin karate. That's how I got started in traditional martial arts.
And that's like the original American karate, right?
Well, it's an Okinawan style. The Okinawan styles are they say hard styles, which are very aggressive.
But here in the States, wasn't that like the first?
One of the early ones, definitely one of the early ones, and I had a lot of fun with that, and I learned a lot about defense from that. I learned about different footwork and different safety zones and stuff like that. And because when you're kicking, it's a bigger safety zone. When you're only throwing punches, it's a smaller safety zone. All that sort of stuff. And then wrestling your contact. Pretty much most of the time. So But it taught me a lot. It taught me a lot, and it taught me to be creative, and it taught me not to get hit with spinning techniques. I can tell you that. I never got hit with a spinning technique, luckily, in my life. So that was good. But yeah, eventually got into kickboxing, the old PKC style, and then I got into K1 rules. I won a U.S. title in that. And then the UFC came along, and when I watched the first UFC, I said, holy cow, they actually invented my sport. And started training heavily, and I had done some judo and stuff at that time. But gosh, that was 93 when I started doing jiu-jitsu at that point. So, and then won the UFC title, trained, put, I think 95 athletes into televised careers and 12 world champs. And then I just got into the TV stuff, the TV world. And of course, I've trained law enforcement, military for a lot of years. Haven't done that for a while, quite a while. And I'm kind of looking to get back into that because number one, I found out kind of the hard way. The money's great in TV, but I can tell you that TV doesn't make me as happy. Right? Yeah. I love teaching people, and that's what I'm really good at. I think that I enjoy it the most. And the world stops all the trouble stop in the world when I'm teaching. And I'm sure it feels the same for you.
Sure. Yeah, you kind of immerse into it. You've trained, you just said 12 other champions, right? Some of those guys were like Matt Hughes, Jens
Pulver, Tim Sylvia, Dave Monet, Rich Franklin, Mark Coleman and Pride, and then some other IFL individual world champions, and then two team championships with the IFL as well, which was a blast. I wish they wouldn't have screwed that up because that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, you guys had a thing going down there. Everybody in the world that was into fighting knew who you guys were for sure. Do you have that training program at all anymore?
I've got the training program for law enforcement and military, or for fighters.
Okay.
Which one?
Well, okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. Are you still training fighters at all?
I work with people who come to me who are, have some potential, and they really need some help. That's one thing that I've noticed in the sport, that the fundamentals are so screwed up with a lot of people that they need help. And nothing worse than when I watch fighters fight, whether I'm calling fights, whether I'm watching on TV, and I watch technique, I watch the mechanics and things like that. And, people aren't being taught footwork and head movement first. If somebody doesn't know how to move correctly, they're just not going to be successful. Mm-hmm. So that's really important. And the transitions of the game, understanding, how to get a fight to the ground correctly and safely, a lot of that sort of stuff. So, so when I look at somebody and I say to myself, this kid's got a lot of talent, but no direction, and maybe not enough people dedicating some time on teaching them fundamentals, then I'll kind of just take them under my wing and start working with them.
So are you kind of semi-retired now?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really coached full time for many years, actually. So for me, I don't know whether I would get back in full time to coaching fighters, simply because I've been that route. I climbed that mountain a bunch of times with a bunch of guys. What happens to me is I get connected to them. I get connected to them like they're my little brother or little sister. And when I was younger, the mentality was kill or be killed, right? But the sport, I've been through the sport in many aspects. I've worn many hats. I've seen what it can do to people. I've seen people come out the other side. They're not the same person at all, mm-hmm. because of the damage that they've taken. So it's, I love teaching people. I love teaching people how not to get hurt, how to move their head, how to defend things, that sort of stuff. But if I started getting connected to guys at the end, to where I'm like, I just don't want to see people get hurt. I don't need to be up front. I don't need to be that connected to people personally and see guys, get, cause, a lot of times, what I'm talking about in the UFCs, most people don't realize, I mean, there were have been many cards where they look okay, but all of them end up in the hospital.
Sure.
All of them. So it's a rough sport, and I love the sport, but it can chew people up and spit them out pretty harshly.
Would you go back? If you could go back, would you do it again? Would you take all those blows and give them all?
I would, because it's ended up making me who I am today. Mm-hmm. You've got to accept the path you took. And you know, I think it was the path that I think I was pushed into, right? You know, because I was going to school at the time when I had to leave and take care of my mom. That's just the way it worked out, right? I chose that path, and or was pushed into it, and I loved every minute of it. I did.
I heard you giving a talk one time. You were talking about people not making weight and how much like you disrespect or really have no respect for the person that can't make weight. And you talked kind of in depth about like that person having a lack of commitment to themselves, their team, their school, and kind of a bunch of other things. You remember that?
Yeah. The thing with me is it's a symptom of society. I was gauging years ago that society was taking a turn for the worse by the left lane drivers on the interstate, right? You can just tell the common sense is kind of gone, the lack of commitment, the lack of detail, the lack of, a lot of, just intestinal fortitude and toughing things out. When I was growing up here in Iowa, I started cutting weight in 6th grade, and I never missed weight. We're wrestling, all winter, and then I'd wrestle during the summer doing freestyle or folk style tournaments and stuff like that. So I was wrestling, 3/4 of the year basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to make weight constantly. And as a kid, I was making weight, and then through high school, and then, later on in life, and then as a fighter, I never missed weight. And our team, we had one, maybe two, because he took a fight on 2 days' notice, didn't make weight. But besides that, everybody always made weight. And if somebody didn't make weight on the other side of one of our bouts, we made them try up to the very deadline. We were gonna make them sweat it out, and then if they couldn't make it, we'd take some of their money. You know what I mean? So it's if you sign on the dotted line, do what you said you'd do, make weight, and that's just the way it is.
You made a comparison as you just started talking about that to like drivers in the left lane. What immediately made you think of society as a whole as I brought that up?
Well, I've always been very observant of society and how things are going, and as humans are, shall we say, humans, I've said it a lot, are the most easily trained animals on the planet. And the TV does the training, right? And it's very easy. And then you combine that with, the processed foods and some of the other toxins and stuff. And I'm very aware of the environment altogether. You know what I mean? And that's something that I just started recognizing, that people just weren't the same. People didn't have the same level of common sense. And it struck me as very, very odd, and the amount of obesity and all the other things that were going wrong. We knew years ago that it was going to be difficult to have legitimate war fighters to a certain extent, or enough people to go to a real war. Now we've got so technical, and the AI and everything else is kind of taken over. But, I think it was, I'm trying to remember which military officer it was that talked about just the city of Philadelphia. Like 15% of the kids military age that could even get in were so obese, right? So there was a lot of that. I've always paid attention to, my surroundings, the environment, my fellow citizens, the environment of just mentality and things like that, right?
I've noticed over the last, few years, it seems like a lot of the stuff you talk about or comment online isn't about fighting at all. You're talking about a lot of cultural, social type issues.
Yeah. And, for me, I think my mind got opened very early on. I think I was 5 or 6 years old, down in southern Iowa on my grandma's farm with my mom, and they woke me up. I don't even know what time it was. It was still dark, and we went into downtown Albia, Iowa, to the Farmers National Bank or whatever it was then. And we were standing outside the bank. We were the first ones in line. And then as the morning went on, the line grew down the street and around the block of farm families that were there to get their money out of the bank. It was a rush on the banks, and that was due to Nixon taking us off the gold standard and creating the petrodollar.
Mm-hmm.
So I was asking a lot of questions at that point. So I was always the kid sitting on the living room floor listening to Walter Cronkite, and just paying attention and asking questions of myself and things like that. And as I got older, I just became more aware.
What is it that you're passionate about right now? You're just decided to come on and chat with us. What is the stuff that you're pondering, thinking about, musing on these days?
Well, for me, I'm passionate about training people. I want to get back into that heavy. I love doing that. Like I said, I'm really into that. I'm into people's health, with educating people on where their health comes from. It does come from the earth. It doesn't come from laboratories. It's very, very important. And, so those are the things that I'm really passionate about. And then, I do a podcast with my friend Jeff. We haven't done a lot of them of late because we kind of just took a step back, because it was about a year before this all happened. We were paying attention, and we're interviewing, economists like Peter Schiff, talking to, former intelligence officials, people, research scientists, and then reporters from around the world, and just paying attention to everything. And I stood back, and, it was about a little over a year before this all happened. And I realized that the spring of 2020, things were going to get kind of squirrely, and so we were reporting on things as they were kind of ramping things up, alerting people a little bit. Hey, you might not want to listen to them. You might not want to don a mask. You might want to leave your business open, because this is not going to take a good turn if everybody complies with it. And so it is what it is. I went to the grocery store and everybody had masks on. I didn't wear one, of course, but I thought, yeah, here we go. So it's gonna get kind of interesting.
Do you not think COVID's real, or like causes problems if you get sick?
No. COVID's absolutely real. It's 100% real. That's the thing that,
I wanted to make sure I understood what you were saying.
Yeah. So, I got sick with it in January before the March, when they announced that it was actually in the States. I got sick with it in January, and it hit me very hard. And so I felt it. I felt it. But, I try to educate people on things like the history of, and a lot of people will look at me and go, dude, are you insane? And I go, well, no, this is actually documented, the things that we talk about, where you ask people. I had a doctor confront me, and he goes, you need to quit spreading misinformation. I said, what misinformation would that be? And he said, everything that you say on your podcast. I said, okay. So, I said, do you give vaccines at your clinic? And he said, yeah. And I said, okay, then let me ask you, what is the goal of gain of function research? And he didn't know. And I said, okay, well, the goal of gain of function research is to take a pathogen from the animal world and make it transmissible among humans. And he said, okay. And I said, and you can research this, you can look it up. And then I said, now, where did HIV come from? What was the origin of HIV? Do you remember? He said, monkeys. Yeah. How about swine? That's pretty, easy to figure out. Bird flu. Ebola came supposedly from monkey origins, and COVID supposedly from a bat. So then I have to ask people, why do bioweapons labs exist? I don't remember the last bio war. I'm just curious, if we could figure that out. So all I'm trying to do is asking people to question their beliefs, that people in control of our planet might not be the benevolent, caring beings that we all think. So we have to, and I'm a guy who got in trouble just for being in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. None of us were wearing any Trump gear. My friends asked me if I wanted to go, and they said, something historic is going to happen. And I thought, you're right. You're probably right. So we went, and I was taking pictures with all kinds of people that were there. And but the thing was,
what kind of trouble did you get in?
Well, my broadcasting job went away because a guy decided to write a false article about me and say that I supported domestic terrorism, white supremacy.
Wow.
And so for me, I tell people, look, if I'd ever said or done anything or written anything racist, they would have pulled it up. They would have figured it out. I'm not that way. That's not the guy I am. So, but anyway, you know, for me, I was already questioning my belief long before that about Donald Trump. You know, when the NDAA got renewed, my hairs stood up on the back of my neck and said,
Sure.
Okay, we got some problems now, right? We got some problems. So what I'm trying to do now is just tell people, hey, we all got the same information from the mainstream media, and we all reacted with a little bit of fear, some with a lot of fear.
Mm-hmm.
We all acted out of the emotion of love. We care for our families. We want them to be safe, right? And so we all had the same emotions to a certain extent, but for different reasons, right? Depending on how much research we've done, how far into the subject matter we had gone, and things like that. And for me, having talked to research scientists on my show before, for me, I just went, yeah, this one's not looking too good. I don't like the tone of the media on this one. So all I'm telling people is, no matter what you believe, understand that we all come from the same place, that we're acting out of love for our families, for our communities, for our country, all of that sort of stuff. And we need to remember not to allow the media to paint one or the other side as the opponent or the enemy or anything like that. That's very important.
When you had the broadcasting job taken away, I'm assuming you tried to fight that. I mean, of course, you can't fight like.
No, it was, and I still love those guys, but it put them in a pickle. You know how it is. Any kind of accusation and a lot of the community just goes, well.
That's the stuff I'm so sick of, because at the end of the day, it really comes down to, sorry, so this news outlet or whoever you were working for, their board says, okay, we can't have this guy here because there's bad optics. We don't want people to think we're hiring a dude that supports terrorism. And anybody would think that's normal. But who are they afraid of? They're afraid of the opinions of their viewers. So it's just like I shared a video today of Norridge, Illinois, Ulta store. Some freaking dudes in masks clearing the store out in broad daylight because they know nobody's going to stop them. And nobody's going to stop them because nobody wants the backlash of riots and the general public saying that there was police brutality or whatever. So It's like at the end of the day, who are these people that really are against you going to Washington, or somebody standing up to thugs robbing a store, or, not at all the same thing, but it's like that's what we're really talking about. It's like, I'm afraid of my neighbor's opinion, or I'm afraid of my kid's school teacher's opinion, or I'm afraid of the person down the street at the convenience store's opinion.
Well, it's their opinion until you lose your job, right? And
well, what I mean by that is, that's the thing. Like, so the people that are causing you to lose their job, they're scared of these people's opinion. We're just all scared of everybody's opinion.
Right. Well, and unfortunately, we've got millions of nurses and many doctors that are getting ready to leave, and they're willing to walk away from their jobs.
And that's scary as hell.
It's very scary. It's very scary. I talked to one of my friends, one of the team leaders, East Coast guys, and he's retiring here any day, luckily for him. But he said, yeah, we're going to lose a lot of guys. A lot of guys are going to, and that's, the writing has to be on the wall, that people understand what is happening. That if we and people can think I'm crazy all they want, because look, I've been right all along, and I've been right about what's happened way before it's happened. Right? I even said when it was going to start, and I told them the process that would happen. We talked about, they're going to put the boot on the neck, and they're going to take it off during the summer. Then they're going to put it back on. They're going to keep doing this stuff, this beat down bullshit, this psychological warfare. And, so people just, and I lost my train of thought on that, but, people need to understand that if we can come to the belief that it's a possibility that we're being hit with bioweapons, then what's in the injection? And how many placebos were there, right? And when I'm talking to research scientists, and I won't go into details, and I won't talk about their names, I won't talk about the companies that they were with, but they were part of research teams on this particular so-called vaccine, and they left those companies because they did not feel good about what was going on, right? And when you're talking to these people, you know, I don't want to share this stuff with, say, my kids. Do I want to talk about this subject matter with my kids and scare the living shit out of them?
Mm-hmm.
You know, you've got a unique viewership, listeners that are guys that are alphas and things like that, and they can at least kind of absorb this sort of stuff because they can see what's going on around them, right?
I hope so. I mean, I don't have fully formulated opinions on all of this stuff. I'm pretty savvy to it. I know when I have friends that spent the bulk of their life in the medical field and they're willing to quit their job over being forced to take a vaccine, that's meaningful to me.
And they were the guys that weren't skipping the other vaccines, right?
Sure. And that goes both ways, though, because I know plenty of medical professionals, my doctor included, that thinks these things are completely safe. I've got a very low level of medical training as an EMT. I'm not a biologist or chemist or anything like that. But it does go both ways, because I do know very astute researchers and medical professionals that don't have issues. And I know these people on a personal level where there's nobody paying them to say these things.
Right,
but again, it is, I think, such a new thing for our society that there's so many folks that just have just trying to find valid information to research and touch and digest that's not been manipulated. I shared that video that I just talked about with that store getting robbed, in the way that the media, I grabbed the video off of a news outlet, and all we did was just share the video. We didn't share the news reporting, but the way that the article was written, they were talking about the man that recorded it, and the reporter called him the self-proclaimed what word did they use? It was just sensationalized, like the self-proclaimed like documenter of the crime, basically. But it was so sensational, rather than the bystander that happened to record the crime. They tried to make this guy somehow sound like the villain, because he was like, holy crap, I can't believe I'm in the store while my wife's buying mascara and I'm watching this. So it's so hard, because you read that and you're like, automatically, instead of thinking, why are these people doing this, you're like, well, wait a minute, what's this guy? What did this videographer have in store? What was he getting out of it? What was his angle?
Right. Well, and that's the thing, is that they've inverted reality for a long time. For several years before this, they were beginning that process of inverting reality. Up is down, down is up, all that sort of shit. And, you know, I can give you an example. One of my daughters, who's in high school, says, look at this email I got from my teacher. And it's an environmental class, right?
Okay.
And so I look at it and says, the email is 10 ways that families can help mitigate climate crisis, right? Or climate change. And I'm going through the list, and I get down to number 5, and it says, get vaccinated. So they're already planning.
This is recent.
This was a year or so, 2 years before, probably a year before this all went down. And I said, you got to be kidding me. So I took that email, that piece of paper, and I went up to a school board meeting, and I chewed their asses. I said, this indoctrination has got to stop. At some point, somebody's got to show some common sense around here, that this is absolutely unacceptable, that getting vaccinated is going to somehow help the climate. Now, so they were already planting seeds, if you know what I mean.
And what was the response from the school board to you pushing back?
They won't, at Bettendorf High School, or at the school board meetings for Bettendorf, for the community of the city of Bettendorf, they don't respond. They keep their mouths shut.
So they just sit and listen to you?
Yeah. So I basically chewed their asses about, what was going on at the school. And now we've got people have to understand how crazy a lot of places are. These education centers, public education, how crazy it's gotten, where there's kids that are, I've talked to a lot of kids, high school age, where they have different names for these groups of kids, where they're the dirties, the furries, and
I've never heard of these things. What the what's the
there's groups of kids that dress a certain way and
okay,
certain colors of hair, and then the next level is kids that are having triangle makeout sessions, bisexual makeout sessions in the locker bays. All this crazy shit going on.
School's not like when we were kids.
Dude, this and this is Iowa. And then you've got the kids that dress up like a cat or a dog and have a leash, and their friend or their partner is walking them around, and they're barking at people in the school or hissing at them and stuff like that.
That's pretty interesting. That's insane.
Yeah. So like I said, they've inverted reality. They've absolutely inverted reality. And the thing is when it's easily explained scientifically, not just psychologically, what they're doing to these kids, but scientifically. If you do some research on it, anybody that's listening can do research. The shampoos, the conditioners, the skin lotions, the deodorants, they all have common chemicals in them that lower testosterone and raise estrogen way up, and screws up the thyroid as well. And a lady that I went to school with called me up, and her estrogen levels were at 417, which are off the charts, which make her at extreme risk for heart attacks, strokes, other things like that. And I suggested a product to her, and she got on it, and it levels out hormones. It cleans out the cells in the body, resets the hormonal system, all this sort of stuff. And I think it was a month or 6 weeks later, she did another blood test, and her estrogen levels were back down to normal. Her testosterone levels were back up, and she's a super healthy person. And that was an all natural organic product that chelates heavy metals and toxins out of the cells and all that sort of stuff. So people's bodies are so right now.
Sure they are.
But that's what's happening is people are acting the way they are because their hormones are just destroyed by the environment that we're dealing with.
I think what people, I'm listening to you and I agree with what you just said. I mean, for example, I buy soap at the farm market in like 10-pound bags of homemade soap from a gal down the road. And
right.
That's what I wash myself with. Some people, they might be like, what the heck? But we all have choices. I can go to Walmart and I can buy XYZ shit shampoo or whatever. I can buy garbage food. Nobody's doing that to me. I'm doing that. I'm choosing to do that. And some stuff is expensive. The soap I buy is significantly more costly than buying Pert Plus or something like that.
Right.
But I also like to support a local lady that's making soaps. I also
absolutely
like to go to the farm market and do that too. I think we've like given up choice. People talk about obesity, and I teach, and I've got a diet, pretty good diet. Like I love beer. I'm not like some guy that lives off of spinach, and I love spinach, but I eat well. But at classes, I was in construction. You talking about concrete? I grew up a carpenter, and so I'd be amazed watching dudes. Everybody was up at night drinking before the job, the day previous, and then they show up and they're all talking about, oh man, I was over at such and such pub last night. I really tied one on. My head's pounding. And they finish their gas station coffee, and then they switch to Coke or Mountain Dew. I worked with a dude that drank two 2-liter bottles of Mountain Dew. He had no freaking teeth, and he smoked like 2 packs of cigs. And then at the end of the day, it was right to the bar for a 6-pack of MGD. It's like, all right, you coffee, Mountain Dew, MGD. Like that's literally what you drink. He died at 40. And that's so common, but I'll be at classes. And that was the point I was going to make. And like lunchtime rolls around, and I usually have like a handful of almonds and a couple radishes and a
Right.
mouthful of water. One, I don't want to be tired and I don't need a bunch of food for what I'm doing. But
Right.
you watch guys like there's just a shit they start pulling out of their car, and you're like, man, how do you live on that? It's choices.
It is. It's definitely choices. And, you know, like we were talking about earlier, obesity has caused some serious, that was what was going to collapse the healthcare system, was obesity and, you know, the heart issues, the diabetes and everything else that comes with that. We were going to run into real problems with the healthcare system. And it's, you know, I'm pretty adamant, and I pretty passionate about educating people about, look, and I don't eat perfect either. But the vast majority of the time, I'm going to eat real things that came out of the ground, you know, things like that.
Sure.
So that's what we have to do. And imagine instead of lawns everywhere, we all had gardens.
Sure. Like all of our moms did.
Yes, absolutely. You know, everybody, you know, and I loved gardening. I love gardening, growing.
Do you garden now, Pat? Do you have a garden now?
Not right now, not in the place that I'm at, because I'm in a new place right now. But I was looking for a place outside of town, way out in the country, and I couldn't talk the significant other into going out there.
Gotcha.
And so, you know, this COVID thing has caused a lot of havoc. I mean, citizen to citizen, family member to family member, people that don't believe what they do, you know, all that sort of stuff. So, you know, it is what it is. I mean, we're even seeing, half a police department's vaccinated, say, for instance, half the fire department, you know, all that sort of stuff, these tangibles. And, you know, think of the NCAA now putting pressure, because they're getting pressure from above, and they're telling all the NCAA programs, all the sports, that all the teams must reach 85% vaccinated to reach herd immunity. And obviously there's some purse strings attached to that. And it's the same thing for states, same thing for counties, same thing for cities. This is all financially incentivized. All the hospitals get you know, the $40,000 or $38,000 for a COVID death. It's all incentivized. And that's, you know, it's pretty transparent to my eyes. And I would hope that people would take a step back and observe and see what's going on and understand, you know, how this is all going down. So let's talk about some training. Talk about some training.
What do you want to talk about?
Well, talk about training. I'd love to talk about, you know, some of the programs that you have, you know, because I'm not familiar with all your programs and stuff. I love to do stuff with shooting instructors, you know, the tactical guys, the guys that understand, you know, building clearing, room clearing, carjackings, fighting for a weapon in a car, you know, that sort of stuff. And merging ideas with people is what I enjoy. And I focus on, in the basic program that I teach, is the 3 H's, the head, the hands, and the hips. If you control 2 of those things during a fight at any given time, you're probably doing all right. And especially paying attention to the hands, you know, because knives and other weapons, guns, and stuff can come out so quickly. And, you know, so a lot of that sort of stuff is kind of what I do. And then the weapon retention and some karambit stuff that goes with those programs when you're trying to teach people, you know, that police officers know they don't belong in ground fighting. They don't belong in, you know, the only time they're on the ground is hopefully if somebody's in prone position, you know, teaching people how to get back to their feet, go back to the tools that are on their hip, you know, on their duty belt, things like that. And mechanically, people don't know how to move themselves. You know, if I don't know how to move myself, I'm certainly not going to move someone else.
Sure.
You know, and so teaching people the fundamentals of how to move correctly, and, you know, proper leverage points and how to grip, you know, something as simple as how someone grabs my wrist tells me exactly what they know. The moment they grab, the moment they put their hands on me, I should. And that was my goal with my buddy Don Roberts, who was a police officer many years and very, very good shooter. But, you know, the whole idea was at the end of this 40-hour class that we would do is that those officers would be able to come away from that. And the minute they put their hands on somebody or somebody put their hands on them, they knew what kind of tiger they had just grabbed the tail of. You know what I mean? So it's it's got to be something that has been proven in street fights over and over, in the cage over and over, and those types of real world applications. Or I'm just not going to teach out of theory.
Our basic premise is, I agree with everything you just said, is simple. Fitness, I think, is lacking. General fitness. I train jujitsu. One of the guys at our gym, I don't know if you ever heard of Bryce Frank. Bryce was national heavyweight Muay Thai champ out of Duke Rufus's gym.
Yeah, Bryce came down to my gym a few times. He's related to a Davenport police officer that's a good buddy of mine.
Yep, I know him too. The amount of guys I see roll in and they say, I want to learn how to fight. And then we have a nice hour roll session after jujitsu class. And it's like all summer, 93 degrees, 94 degrees in the gym. And, you've lived it your whole life. It's a ball sack in there, and you've lost 5 pounds of water in the couple hours you're in there. And these are all dudes that are like me, working a day job. So it's not, these are not pro fighters that they're getting career out of it or trying to. These are just dudes trying to better themselves. So these guys show up and like 8 minutes in are like, shit, like I think my wife just called, I gotta get home. And so they want that benefit of being able to protect themselves in violence, but they don't want to do the thing to get that benefit. And that's kind of my philosophy. What do you want? And there's no, like, that talked for a minute about the guy with the lion in that video I shared today that you saw. That's a real life and death scenario. You guys that are watching or listening, there's a video we put up of a man that was elk hunting, archery hunting, and a mountain lion came into his path just a couple yards from him and was ready to pounce on him. He happened to have his cell phone out and he recorded some of it, which because he was able to record it, people felt like he was intending to generate social media content. You could tell when he did eventually have to shoot the cat that he didn't want to. The guy's adrenalized. But my point in bringing it up, like, that's violence. And if you that up, that guy could have easily been maimed or killed. And I think, back to my point, too often people approach this concept of training martial skills and they don't actually think about, if I need this, something very bad has happened.
Well, and that's the thing is, they'll sit there and say, well, you could have just walked away. Well, then the cat thinks you're prey automatically. Right. So you've really got no choice but to stand your ground to a certain extent. And you could tell the cat came after him and he had to shoot it and drop it. And you could tell in the video, he absolutely hated the fact he had to do that.
Mm-hmm.
They're beautiful animals. He didn't want to do it. I'm all for hunting. I've never been one to ever want to kill a prey animal. Life's tough enough for them anyway. Bears and cougars and everything else like that. I just look at that as, that's got to be kind of a rough life. You're hunting and starving at the same time, and all of that. But I'm all for anything with eyes on the side of its head. That's prey.
I've definitely put some coyotes out of their misery.
Right. Well, coyotes do cause problems. They cause a lot of problems here in Iowa. I've got a buddy who's one of the best in the world at trapping coyotes. He's doing contracts for farmers and, even companies like Alcoa and other big places that just are overrun with coyotes and deer and all that sort of stuff.
We had goats and chickens that they would prey on. So, definitely didn't take pleasure in it, though. But just like that cat would know that this dude is prey by running away, there's people that's like the guy we're training for, the dude in the dark alley that, run away. I'm going to give it to you. And tapping doesn't, I've seen bar fights where guys are tapping on some dude and it's like, that guy doesn't care that you're tapping on him. Probably doesn't even feel it because he's not engaged in sparring with you. He's trying to you up. But you know what I'm talking about? And people, I visit other places and train with people, and I'll go back to our gym and my coach, Dan Hart, I'm wearing his shirt. He'll say, how was the gym? And I'll say, they weren't training for violence. They were training for fun, which I don't care. People can do whatever they want, but and I'm not trying to sound like some BS like, oh, we're badasses or something. But I'm always go ahead.
It's got to, the thing is I'm not proud of it, but I mean, before I ever became a professional athlete, I was probably in a good 250, I don't know, maybe more street fights. And
Bettendorf was that violent, huh?
Well, Davenport, you'd find some rough areas. I was bouncing at some pretty rough clubs and things like that.
I see.
And I mean, there were some melees that 100 people were involved. And you're just trying to survive. And so I've seen stuff blow up really fast. I've seen fights just like that. The whole place explodes into violence, and you definitely have to be ready for that. And by being ready for that, generally now I never go into those places. I haven't gone into those types of places, obviously, for many years, and haven't been in any kind of street altercation in many years since those days way back. And I don't want to fight. I don't want to hurt anybody. I know the damage that could be done, on the street with people that, whether they're intoxicated or high on drugs or just aggressive, and they don't know what they don't know, but they're very violent, very aggressive and things like that. You just don't want to deal with the repercussions of hurting another human being to the level you might have to, and I've learned that the hard way many, many years ago. The last time I got into a fight on the street, I was actually the UFC champion, and I shouldn't have been in a bar. I was standing in line in a big bathroom. It was a huge bathroom. And there's a long line of urinals along the other wall, and everybody's standing against the other wall waiting for a urinal. And two guys are standing next to each other at urinals, and they start arguing. And I just said, guys, you might not want to get in a fight in here. I mean, you're going to roll around in a bunch of piss on the floor. That's all I said. And one of the guys walks up to me, and he goes, how about I kick your ass too? And I go, listen, man, I don't want to fight. I have no desire to fight. Jens Pulver's out in the bar. He's not in the bathroom, but my judo, the guy that runs the judo program at my gym at the time, is behind me, and he goes, I don't think you know who you're talking to. The guy looks at him and goes, and I'm thinking, why did you say that? I just diffused the whole situation, and here we go. So he goes, oh yeah, who is he? And he said, Pat Miletich. And he goes, oh, I'll be right back. And he walks away, and I'm thinking, nah, he's not coming back. And all of a sudden, my judo coach at the gym taps me on the shoulder, and he says, here they come. And it's
you guys still in the pisser?
Oh yeah, I'm still waiting in line. So I know better, and I know I need to put my hands up, open my hands up, and just say, I don't want to fight. Please don't do this. And I keep backing up. I keep backing up till I get to the wall. And they keep coming. So I had to crack one of them and put him down with just a quick 1-2, and then crack a couple more of them. And then the fourth guy kind of backed off. And bouncers come in, then the cops come in, and three of them are sleeping on the floor. And everybody in the bathroom's going, that guy didn't want to fight. He was begging him. He was begging him. And it's important that you verbalize that when there's going to be an altercation, potentially. You need to make sure everybody knows that you have no desire to fight. You don't want any problems.
Now, not everybody's a world champion in their prime. If that's some 52-year-old dude that doesn't have open hand skills, or even a 50-year-old dude with great open hand skills, 4 dudes on a slippery bar floor, that's a bad sitch.
Right. And these guys, they were Latin Kings, so it was, they were serious about beating my ass. And so anyway, I was, at the time, I had been working with, in the past, the MEG group, Metropolitan Enforcement Group in my area. And apparently one of my students who knew these guys, one of them, I had caved his side of his head in, and his eye had dropped down behind his cheekbone. So he had to have facial reconstructive surgery. And he was filing a lawsuit against me. And so one of the MEG agents pulled him over and said, hey, just to let you know, you might want to get rid of that lawsuit against Miletich, because you're probably going to end up in prison if you take that route. So it was nice to have somebody look out for me a little.
Wow. And just you talking about that, I think the average person that's never been struck or struck somebody doesn't realize how easy our faces break. It's like, right. I don't want nothing to do with that.
No, and I don't want to break my hands. I don't want to, I don't want to get sued. I don't want any of it. I just don't want any of it. So just, I do my best to just stay the hell away from people in general.
And that, I think, is the big thing, guys. I don't hang out in places like that either, but when trouble visits you and you can't get away, or you're with your wife or kids or your grandma and you can't just take off and leave them there, that's the part that is problematic, when it's not just you by yourself, or you can choose not to go there. My wife and I were at the airport a couple months back at O'Hare, and there's a bunch of construction, and so we had parked in a parking garage, which requires you to go under the road to get into the airport down some tunnels. Right. And due to construction, they had routed us past a TSA office, so there's thousands of passengers dragging luggage through these tunnels going into the terminal. And at the same time, we get to this area where TSA's offices are, and it's for employees, not the public. And there's all these people lined up waiting to get badging done at TSA. And There's this dude sitting on the floor with his legs straight out, and the hallway's real narrow. So with all the passengers and all of the employees waiting to get in this office that was not yet open, him sitting there created this bottleneck where people couldn't walk. So they're having to literally lift their bags over this dude's legs. It was this punk sitting there with headphones on. He could see people doing this. So I helped this old lady get her bag over his feet, then my wife's bag. And then I look at him and I just said, "You think you could move your feet?" That's all I said. I didn't say, screw you or you're an asshole. I just said, "Do you think you could move your feet?" And then we walk, and there's all kinds of noise, and I'm half deaf. I turn right, and now my wife and I are alone in this hallway, and I hear something to the effect of like, "What'd you say to me?" He had got up, ran like 100 yards and caught up to us. And we're right to the escalator where we're going to now go into the terminal. And my wife's like, "That's that guy behind us." And she's thinking like he's got a weapon. He's like 10 yards away from me. I just said, "Dude, I'm going to my airplane. Like I'm not, if we had somewhere to be, I'm not fighting with you, especially in an airport." I'm like, "There's cameras everywhere. What kind of an idiot are you?" Which I was concerned, like somebody that's that big of an idiot is an idiot. I don't know what this dude's intentions are, but my point in the story is like, that's that proverbial part of me is like, pick your bag up, swing it into this dude's face, and then let's go. But I'm like, I'm going on the airplane. And so he basically was like, "You ain't a man." And I'm like, "Yeah, you got me, man. I ain't a man. Bitch. Have a good day." And of course I sat on the airplane seething, but that's but stupid ego.
Well, yeah. And that's the thing. And discernment though, I've had moments of lack of judgment and not using discernment in situations, and I've learned lessons from it, and that's what I guess life is. And I mean, I'm almost full-blooded Croatian, so Croatians have problems with tempers anyway. I mean, and most Croatian guys that I know, they come from that part of the world. It's just, I don't know what it is. They're pretty good at aggression if they have to. You know what I mean? It's just, I don't know. All the way back, you think of 1593, where little Croatia, they stopped the Ottoman Empire in Sisak, Croatia in 1593. That's why a section of Croatia is Muslim, because that's where they got stopped. It got pushed back, right? So that's that blend of people in that area.
I didn't know that. Have you visited Croatia?
I haven't. And, I got offered for years, free trips, all kinds of stuff. And I was so busy. I was so dedicated to fighting, to coaching, broadcasting, all that stuff. I was constantly on airplanes, and I just never took them up on it. And I even got offered, if you come over here and you spend, a certain amount of time each year training, our law enforcement, military, stuff like that, we'll just kind of give you a little villa on the Adriatic and stuff. And I just never took advantage of it, unfortunately. And I haven't renewed my passport since all this stuff started, because I just won't wear a mask. I won't get on a plane because of the mask rule. So I'll drive. I mean, I've got a gig likely that I could be doing in Las Vegas at the end of October, a big tattoo convention that I'm kind of hosting the TV portion of it. And, I'm going to drive. I'm going to take a 2-day drive. I've never driven that stretch, to go to the Southwest. I've always kind of wanted to.
It's a great drive.
Yeah. So I'm excited about it, and I'm sure you've gone out there for SHOT Show and stuff like that.
Oh yeah. I drive all over the country. I've driven through every one of the lower 48 states numerous times. So
yeah. That's the one path that I haven't taken. I've driven to the Northeast. I've driven to the Southeast. I've driven up, Colorado, Montana type areas, but I've never gone to the Southwest by road. So I'm looking.
It's great.
Yeah.
You could jump onto most of Route 66 if you wanted to from where you're at.
That would be awesome. I would love it.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Are you into tattoos or it's just a job?
I've got some tattoos, but I never really spent a ton of money on tattoos, but I actually love the art. I mean,
you got that barbed wire, don't you? Don't you have like barbed wire or some shit?
Yeah, the Celtic warband.
Okay, yeah.
Then I've got a Croatian crest on one shoulder. So that's, yeah. But the first tattoo I got, I was 18. I was still in high school, and it's a pretty funny story actually. A guy that I played football with and wrestled with, his brother had just gotten out of prison, and I just had mentioned in passing, I'm like, I think I'm going to get a tattoo, and he goes, my brother does tattoos, and I said, okay, and he came and gave us tattoos. The slot car, the little slot cars that we used to play with.
Yeah.
With the little electric motors that spun.
Yeah.
He jerry-rigged one of those with a needle and was dipping it in pen ink. And I literally got a prison tattoo at 18 years old.
That's funny.
It's bad. It was bad. So I had to get that covered up.
Okay. I was going to ask if it's still on you.
Yeah, it's covered up. It was a nice looking prison tattoo.
That sounds horrible.
It was a gorilla smoking a cigar.
Did it look like a gorilla smoking a cigar?
It actually looked pretty decent. The guy could draw pretty well, but the ink is, right away. It's like, if somebody saw it on me, they'd be like, just got out of prison, apparently.
That's funny. The training stuff that you said you want to get back into training cops. What does that program look like? Is that still 40-hour program?
No, what we found is, and we've had a track record over the years. I've done it for about 25 years overall, but we've had a track record and nobody getting any serious injuries. Sure, they're sore. But what we were finding is that a 40-hour course for law enforcement, a lot of them weren't, they weren't really able to function by the end of the week. And it wasn't because we were torturing them. They were just doing a lot of reps on, basic fundamental movements and techniques and things like that. So we slimmed it down to 3 days, and we experimented a little bit on how to get through, get it packed into 3 days and simplify it a little bit, because less is more many times when you're working with people who, and the routine where, there'll be a guy on the department who's never really been in a fight before or anything like that. He hasn't done any real martial arts or combatives or anything. And the chief will go, you're our DT instructor.
Yeah.
Right? And they'll show up to one of our courses and they don't know their left foot from their right foot sometimes. And many of the guys are very dedicated, very good at what they do, and very easy to teach and absorb everything quickly. They're high-speed guys, but you're going to get people that just aren't. And, I always would have to give the speech of, here's the deal. I don't dumb things down to the lowest common denominator. I'm not going to do that. We're all going to get through this together. I'll work with you extra. Don will work with you extra, but you are going to be able to do this, and you're going to be able to show me that you can do this. And by the time, the 3 days is done, we have to be able to incorporate everything you've learned into a 5-minute drill of me just talking to both you and your partner, and the whole room's partnered up, and we can talk them through every scenario, on the ground and standing, weapon retention, all of it. And they have to be able to do that. And we are stressing with people, before you go out, this is a drill you can do before you go out, just to refresh your memory, these sort of things, to just kind of retain the skill set, because, it's just like anything else, it's perishable, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So
I think there's, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
Well, and, we're also guys who, and I'll say that Don's a unique individual. He's from Southern Illinois. Originally, he was a cop up in the Chicago area for several years, and he's a unique individual. Like our group of people call him and his dad carnies. They're just very, very unique individuals, very powerful country boys, who can shoot, riding a damn horse at 40 miles an hour. They could shoot a target. They're just kind of freaks in nature. But when we'd get to the weapon retention part of things, is where we'd kind of put the screws to people and say, we're on the ground, tripped over a parking block, whatever. You're on your back. The guy's on top of you. I don't care what position. We're gonna show you from all these positions what we think you should do. But we want you to get back up to your feet the way you were taught. And the way that they were taught was, mechanically incorrect. And they were never going to get back to their feet. In the window of opportunity for me being the top guy, if I'm a bad guy, that window is endless. So I'm going to end up probably, if I can't figure out the holster and how to get the gun out, I'm going to start punching them in the head. I'm going to do whatever I've got to do. And so the idea is that window has to be as small as possible. And so we would do it with them, and Don would whisper in their ear while they couldn't get up, and he'd tap them in the face, not hard at all, but he'd whisper in their ear, "I'm going to kill you, and then I'm going to kill your family." And we had some people break. I mean, they would mentally break. They'd panic. Sure. They had claustrophobia and things like that. And we had some people even realize at that moment that they did not want to be a police officer. And some had actually quit, not only quit the training at that moment, but they quit the department. And so it was just kind of such a shock to their system that it could happen so easily. And that was not what we wanted, but we wanted everybody to understand the seriousness of the situation.
Sure.
But then
better to find that out there than for real.
Right. So then we'd teach them how to get up correctly from whichever position they were on in the ground, and get them to where they gained that confidence and that ability to get up, in a very short amount of time. And that's, the goal is you want people to come out of there going, okay, I learned a shitload. I had a blast. They make me laugh. You got to do a dog and pony show to a certain extent. You want to entertain people. You want them to laugh their asses off. You want them to have a good time, and you want them to come away saying, okay, I learned a lot. I learned a lot, about what I need to be doing.
I'll wait for that bike to take off behind you before I talk over it. Some people attribute you as one of the fathers of MMA. Would you say that's accurate?
The only thing that I could say is that, I was a good wrestler. I was not a world-class wrestler by any means. I certainly beat a lot of good wrestlers. But for me, when I had done some boxing and had wrestled my entire life, I was lucky that the Davenport Boxing Club, Albino Pena was the coach down there. And, that's a place where a lot of incredible boxers came out of, the Michael Nunns, the Antoine Eccles, a lot of the McGowan brothers, the Panzloffs. They had probably the best amateur team in the country when I was going down there. And, so I had some really good people to learn from. But what I observed when I watched the early UFCs is that everybody was, it's like religion. My religion's the real religion. I'm not going to change my mind. The way that I shoot is the way that I shoot. This stance is the way I should do it.
Yeah.
This, all of that sort of stuff about opening them. And so, yeah, absolutely. And so for me, I observed that people were driven off of egos, whether they were a wrestler, a karate guy, whatever, judo guy, and that, they were gonna live and die by that system, right? And I at least had been exposed enough to a few other things where I went, why would I not want to learn everything that I can, the fundamentals, and get as good as I can to be able to go, an hour with a world-class jiu-jitsu black belt and just back and forth, neck and neck.
Mm-hmm.
Why wouldn't I want to be able to do 10 rounds with a world-class or world champion boxer sparring? Why wouldn't I want to be able to deal with Division I wrestlers and all those things and spar with world-class Muay Thai fighters, and get to where I can hang with all those guys in those separate areas. And then I'm probably got a pretty well-rounded game where I can deal with kind of any situation, at least hopefully checkmate them a little bit in their strong areas. And if I can even attack their strong areas to crush them mentally, then when we end up in the areas where I'm better than them, then they're really, then they're mentally really screwed.
Bruce Lee was kind of into that. That was his philosophy.
Yes, I guess he was blackballed for it.
Yeah, yeah. And my comment about you and MMA was more modern times, because nothing like UFC or Pride or any of that was a thing back in Lee's day. But
right. And I got into the history of, not just the Gracie family, because obviously they were massive contributors to the sport of MMA. But, going back to the late 1800s, early 1900s, and the catchling days, because I grew up wrestling. The catch wrestling appealed to me a great deal, as well as Russian Sambo and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So we kind of had the mentality of what works is what works. And, having that strong wrestling base was super important to be able to decide most of the time where the fight was going to take place. And that's pretty important when it comes to a fight.
I've got a couple buddies that were D1 wrestlers that I brought to my gym, and others that don't do any jiu-jitsu. And it's funny to watch guys like grab onto those dudes, and it's like spring steel and iron, dudes just slammed over and over again.
Yeah. And that's the funny thing so my town is about 37,000 people. And when I was the UFC champ, I got asked by a media person. They said, "What's it like to be one of the baddest dudes on the planet?" I go, "I'm about the 26th toughest guy in my town." I don't think you realize how scary. I mean, there's guys that grew up in this town when I was a little bit younger than them, and I was absolutely mortified of these guys. And they were the guys that were
dudes
the
with
D1
arms
wrestlers.
like praying mantises. Just
dude,
yeah.
I mean. And, give you an example, Nick Ackerman, people can look him up. He wrestled for Simpson College. He was a national champion. And when he won the national championship, Cale Sanderson won his national championship. And they were twin Hodge Trophy award winners as the most honorable. It's a Heisman Trophy of wrestling, basically, the Danny Hodge Award.
I didn't know that.
And remind me to tell you a story about Danny Hodge. But Nick Ackerman had, his legs were gone from just below his knees. He had little nubs down below his knees. So he wrestled on his knees, but had he had his lower legs, he got blood meningitis when he was 3, and they had to amputate his legs.
Wow.
And so he had prosthetics, but had he had his lower legs, he would have been probably 6'8". So he was a huge man and huge hands, and extremely powerful. And you wrestled with him he's on his knees, right? And I don't think there's very few people that I've felt that are that powerful of a guy when he grabs a hold of you. And those are the type of people. Steve Rusk, he's a Rock Island County Sheriff's deputy. He was the kind of guy, I tried to hit him with a Metzger, a throw, and all he did was sag his hips, and he broke my leg. He snapped my fibula while I was training for a fight in Japan, just from sagging his hips. That's the kind of power that you're dealing with with those guys. And so I would tell people, that were coming up there fighting a really good, a D1 wrestler, an All-American or something from other gyms and stuff. And they'd say, "Yeah, we've been doing a lot of wrestling." And I said, "Okay, are you wrestling with D1 All-American stuff?" There's a big difference.
Yeah.
If you're not wrestling with guys that were All-Americans at that level, you just don't comprehend the power and the explosiveness and things like that, So I grew up wrestling with guys of that caliber, and it certainly helped me prepare for fighting, just to deal with that kind. It's kind of impossible to explain to people just how powerful these guys are. I mean,
it's demoralizing.
It can be definitely demoralizing. And Steve Rusk, he only fought 4 times. All of his fights lasted about 30 seconds. And after his 4th fight, he looked at me and he goes, I don't really get great excitement out of this. I've kind of had enough. But before that fight, those folding metal chairs are pretty solid. I watched him grab it and bend it in half, just like crush it before he went out to fight. And, that's the kind of power that these guys have. They're out there. There's a lot of people out there that you don't realize.
When I was
about farm boys,
about 17, 18, I had a guy I worked with that was my age then, and he was a little compact dude, good shape. He was a carpenter I worked with, and he was a wrestler just in high school. You know, didn't go to college or anything. But he was a good high school wrestler. I think he was like a top 10 guy in his age bracket or weight bracket in high school,
Right.
in the state. But he still was fit, and we were screwing around in his backyard one day. He was probably mid to late 40s. I was 18, 19, and this dude just threw me around that yard until I couldn't. I was like, all right, I'm done, man. Like my hips, my head hurts. You slammed my head into the ground. Like it was just over and over, just relentless. I'm trying to stuff him, and he'd go the other way. I'd try to get my leg back, and he'd freaking slamming me over his head. And I'm like, there's no mats out here either. Like this sucked. That was the last time I did that with him. His name was John Redmond. Just bashed me into the earth over and over again.
Yeah, no, that's the Steve Rusk that I'm telling you about. I talked about him on the Joe Rogan show, but the first time we went at it, a buddy of his who was active military, and he was back on leave, and he calls up the gym. This is back in the day when there were still a term called dojo busting. You remember that, right?
Sure.
People would show up at the gym, and you know, I'm a world champion in taekwondo or karate or this or that, and I want to fight the toughest guy here. That sort of stuff went on, right? So this guy comes in, and he's a wrestler. He actually wrestles for the Army. And he comes in, or had wrestled for the Army. I can't remember, it was so long ago. But so we rolled, and I submitted him, you know, a bunch of times. He goes, I'm going to bring a guy back that you're not going to be able to do this to. And I said, all right, well, bring him back. So he brings Rusk back, and Rusk, you know, is a, you know, national champion wrestler. And we went at it for 45 minutes. He's a good bit bigger than I am, but you know, it's that getting every choke you can think of on him. You're getting every, you know, arm bars, all kinds of stuff, and you're getting dribbled like a basketball, slammed off the mat, and all kinds of stuff. And we went at it for 45 minutes, and he ended up training with me for 14 years. You know, and he went to and this is really it's a cool story. So he got accepted on the Rock Island County Sheriff's Department, and said, I'm going down to Springfield to the academy down there. And I said, okay, well, don't tell them that you train with me. Don't tell them about your wrestling background. Don't tell them about anything. Just don't divulge any of that info so they don't know, you know, your background. I said, you know, because at the time, I had been there, and some of the instructors were, you know, a little bit of ego, a little bit of alpha stuff. You know, it's always, you're always going to run into that in this world. And so he went down there and had done the defensive tactics program, and you know, with the other stuff that he had to do down there at the academy. And then they said, okay, now 4 instructors are going to attack you at one time. You need to defend yourself. And that ended in about probably 30, 40 seconds. They were all hurt. They're all laying on the ground. And, you know, the head guy goes, dude, what is up with you? Where did you get all these skills? He goes, well, you know, I wrestled at Augustana College, and then I was at the University of Illinois under Mark Johnson, and then I trained with Pat Miletich for a lot of years, and this and that. And he goes, well, why didn't you tell us? He goes, I didn't want you to know. But that's how scary people can be.
Yeah. Yeah. And those guys were probably no slouches either.
Right. No, there were some big guys down there at the time. And, you know, so that's the thing is, it seems like, for me anyway, the more that I've learned how to hurt people, you understand how many ways there are to be hurt, right? So and I think that everybody, you know, if society, everybody learned these sort of things, there would be a lot more respect given to each other. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. You know, everybody's got an atomic bomb.
Couple of fake teeth right here from a punch, and it's like that's expensive. And it's really annoying to have to lay in a dentist chair over and over again and pay the time to do it. And like, yeah, just even accidentally somebody busting your teeth out sucks, let alone on purpose. So
right.
Yeah, I want nothing to do with that. What? No. Everything kind of you brought up back in the day, like when we were kids, karate was the thing. Every town in America had a couple karate schools, taekwondo schools, shit like that. And that was the thing, right? This guy told you this is the way it's going to be. Your wrestling can't beat my karate. I got a friend that is I think 3-4 stripe jiu-jitsu black belt, just won a national IBJJF title. Good freaking dude. His name's Todd Fox. I don't know if you know Todd or have ever crossed paths.
I've heard the name.
Todd, years ago, he does tour security, and there's a video of him. I believe he was a Motley Crue tour. Somebody else's bodyguard guy is I think ninjutsu. I think the guy was a ninjutsu practitioner, and basically, I think that the listeners don't quote me on it, but in Eastern martial art, and basically told Todd, like, I could. Your stuff is like high school. Mine is like PhD level college stuff.
Right.
So they were in New York. Todd called up Renzo Gracie and was like, "Hey, I got this dude that says our jiu-jitsu shit." So Hollis Gracie, who's also a friend, filmed him just mopping the mat with this guy back and forth. And at one point, Renzo tells Todd, all you hear is he says, "Okay, no strikes. And the guy looks at Renzo, the karate guy, and he's like, "That's all I got." And he goes, "I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to," because Todd had been like open hand slapping him and bashing him about. But finally the guy was like, "All right, I give," after 5-10 minutes of just getting his ass beat. But my point in bringing the story up. So it's a funny story. The video's out in the world. The shit happens all the time. Why do people not understand that this is that these things don't stand up after all of this vetted knowledge over and over? There's a guy on Instagram that we actually recorded a podcast, McDojo Life. I don't know if you ever see his stuff. He's got a YouTube channel. He's trying to create a documentary, which they've been filming, all about, and I'm not saying all martial arts are bullshit. He really fixates on the ones that people wave their hands and dudes fall on the ground, kind of bullshit.
Well, that's the power of suggestion, right? And that proves my point. And I used to do that at seminars now and then to test it, because I recognized the power of suggestion at a comedy club. There was a hypnotist who, said, "Any volunteers come up on stage, and anybody else that wants to try to be hypnotized at your table, go ahead and try it. And after I get everybody into those that choose to try, if they're sitting next to you at your table and they're asleep, don't touch them, don't say anything, just point at them, and I'll come get them and bring them up on stage." So, my girlfriend at the time said, "Yeah, I'm going to give it a shot." Well, he hypnotized her. She went up on stage, and I watched this craziness. Well, he had a Hell's Angel up there giving birth to a baby. All kinds of
it hurts.
And this is where I'm saying, this is dangerous stuff. The power of suggestion, how easily this can happen. And he said at the end of it, he said, if you're a smoker, every cigarette you light hereafter, you'll almost puke. It'll taste awful to you, and you'll never be able to smoke again. And he said, and when you walk out of this comedy club, you're going to see thousands of UFOs in the sky. And then when you get in the vehicle to go home, you will not remember any of this. You'll go back to normal, and you'll have no recollection of this happening. So I said, holy shit, this is going to be amazing. So I got out of the club, and I just wanted to observe these people coming out. There were about 20 of them. And they'd come out, and they'd stare up in the sky, and they'd point, and they'd scream, and they're just freaking out. Look at that. Oh my God. And then my girlfriend got in the van that we were getting in. We were in the back sitting in one of the rows. She gets in and she goes, "Okay, where are we going?" I go, "Do you remember anything from?" She goes, "What are you talking about?" I said, this is powerful. So then I started doing it at seminars, and I would say, I'd show a completely bullshit technique where anybody with any knowledge of fighting, of striking, of grappling, or whatever it was, if they saw me teaching it, they'd pull me off to the side and say, "Miletich, what
is this crap?
What is it? What we got?" So I would teach it, and I'd say, "Okay, get your partner, do 10 reps each back and forth, and I'll correct you guys, as a group, when I notice some people doing certain things wrong. So I just go lean against the wall and I'd watch them do it. They'd all just start practicing, right? And then I'd call them, I'd center them back up after a couple minutes. And I go, did anybody in this room question what you were just taught? Like anybody? And every once in a while, somebody kind of raised their hand sheepishly. But that's when I would say, don't ever fully trust anything you're told or shown until you take a step back and really analyze what it is, right? And this is where recognizing how the media works, because a hypnotist will make or basically elicit a feeling, an emotion, and then make a suggestion, right? And they'll do that over and over and kind of take you down a path, take you down a road, right? And there's guys that can hypnotize you when you don't know you're being hypnotized. If you're susceptible to it at all, they can lure you down that path, right? There's guys that are that good at it. And so anyway, the media will basically show you body bags, a refrigerator truck, giant bowl and a bat in a bowl of soup, somebody having a convulsion in a Chinese hospital bed. Now they've instilled the emotion of fear in you. And then someone who most people consider a purveyor of the truth, an authority of the truth, the newscaster, got to put on a mask, got to don a mask, need to shelter in place. Everybody's going to die. And so it goes right past the cognitive part of the brain and seats itself as a belief in the lizard part of the brain, where you can't get it out with a crowbar. That's why you can't show stacks and stacks and stacks of data. You can't even I couldn't put a research scientist in front of one of these people and convince them that they they will not believe anything else. And that's the difficult part of having a conversation with folks that have a belief. So all I ask people to do is question your beliefs about everything in your life, about everything you believe. And you have to do that daily, of what you're ingesting information wise, what you're seeing, the things like that. And if everybody would do that in an honest fashion, we wouldn't be in this situation to begin. We just wouldn't.
Can't we trust anybody? Like if you were my coach, I feel like I should be able to trust you and not question everything you're telling me.
Well, I think, look, I've learned from a lot of people in this world, right? I've been lucky enough to shoot with special forces guys, and I'm a shitty shooter. Like, I'm a caveman, right? I'm absolutely caveman. But the first time I shot with high level special forces guys, I didn't even feel like picking up a gun, right? But those guys, I'm going to listen to, right? They're showing me shit that is absolutely real, and the plates are dropping faster than I can friggin' blink, right? So these guys know what they're doing. Yeah, I'm going to listen to these guys. I went skydiving with those guys only because of who they are, and said, well, these guys have been through a lot of tours of duty and are still alive. They figured out how to stay alive. Yeah, that's the guy I'm going to be attached to and jump out of a plane, right? So when you see those guys that just wave their hands and people fall down, that's the power of suggestion. They've entered a cult, and they don't recognize they're in a cult, and that's it. And that's the same cult that exists, the right paradigm versus the left paradigm, right?
Right.
We can all get ginned up and stuff. And look, I'm very honest with people. I voted for Trump, but again, I had to sit back and notice some certain things that he was doing behind the scenes and go, no, probably not the guy. Probably not the guy he says he is, right? So that's I have to admit that and be honest about that to show people that I'm willing to do that.
Sure.
Otherwise, how could I expect somebody else to do that? With their belief system or anything else that exists in their life, to examine it and question.
Makes good sense. On that same thread, do you think there's always these ebbs and flows and like the new sexy thing, like everybody's into leg locks and all that now? Is the stuff that you were teaching 20 years ago just as relevant today in the sport side of things? Would you have to revamp things if you try to get back into that game of training fighters?
Look, there's always going to be modifications, and what it is a cyclical, basically fundamentals stay the same, but there's variations. There's very artistic minds out there that are going to take things. If I'm a basketball coach, I need to teach you the fundamentals, and your artistic mind is going to take over from there, whether you're going to be a three-point shooter or you're going to be dunking all the time, right? Just depending on your artistic mind and what you envision yourself as. I was teaching a lot of leg locks back in the day because I had a heavy Sambo background, but I recognized where the flaws were in Sambo, where they didn't leverage the body, hold the body in one place with their feet. They expose their own legs sometimes, things like that. When the best time to leg lock somebody is when they're going for a leg lock on you. That's generally the only time I'm going to go for a leg lock, is if somebody's hunting my leg, because many times they forget about their own legs. And that's when you're going to get leg locks on people, when they go for them on you. Say for instance, Mike Miletich, who's got a big school out in Colorado Springs. We were cornering Matt Hughes, and after we got done training Matt for the day, Mike and I rolled, and I leg locked him a bunch of times, and he goes, "Dude," this is ridiculous. And so I took him through a series of just very basic drills on how to get leg locks and how to flow from one leg lock to another, back, and depending on how they move their body, how they rolled, how they tried to defend, all that sort of stuff. And it's just a real fundamental drill to teach somebody the fundamentals of leg locking. That's all you need to teach somebody. And then from there, they're going to modify things, and you can help them modify things however they, depending on their own body. Some people have longer legs, some people have shorter legs, somebody, mechanically are going to do things differently. But Mike, he went down to Brazil with Sergio Monteiro, or not Sergio Monteiro, another black belt that trained underneath me, and I'm trying to remember now. I'll get it. I'll remember it. But so he took him down to Brazil, took him to his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school in Rio de Janeiro, and then took him around to Gracie Baja gyms and some other places. And he submitted all the black belts with leg locks and guillotines. And Mike would walk around the gym with a medicine ball and look at the clock and squeeze it with the right arm. Then he'd squeeze it with the left arm back and forth after practice. So if you got caught in his guillotines or his leg locks, you were in some deep trouble. So he went down, and they kicked him out of the gyms. They said, "That's dirty jiu-jitsu, get out." Right. And so he came back and he laughed. He goes, "Yeah, they kicked me out of these gyms," because back then people really weren't leg locking. And in jiu-jitsu, they considered it dirty to do that type of stuff. Right. So things have obviously moved along quite a bit, and there's some incredible leg lockers out there that are so creative, very flexible, can hit them from anywhere. So it's cool to watch those guys.
I don't like it. Stay the frick away from my legs and feet.
Yeah, because the thing is, people that aren't familiar with leg locks, and you got to remember, with our arms, we use them constantly. We don't realize that our legs are not as, our feet are not, we can't use our feet for things unless we lose our arms. We don't get good with our feet a lot of times, but jiu-jitsu eventually helps us with that. But so the joints are bigger as well. So you get caught in a knee bar, you don't realize how much trouble you're in until sometimes something breaks or snaps. And the same thing with heel hooks, reverse heel hooks. A lot of those are such dangerous techniques that you see legs explode on reverse heel hooks, where it spiral fractures from the lower tibia all the way up into the knee joint.
Yeah, not interested in that.
Right. And so that's
interesting.
So they extremely dangerous, do a massive amount of damage. And back when Sambo was basically kind of mastered by the Russians, that was back in the days of warfare, where the mentality was break somebody's leg so it takes two more soldiers out of the fight because they're going to carry them off the battlefield type thing, right? And that was the mentality. So, everything's got strengths and weaknesses in really all martial arts.
Scary stuff. I think that I like that way you responded to that. What's something about you? Let me rephrase that. What is something about you people don't know? What's something you'd share with folks that they don't know about Pat Miletich?
I don't know. That my favorite people to teach is probably 5-year-olds to 10-year-olds, to be honest with you.
What do you like about that? I love when I show up to our gym and the kids class is still going on. I'll go watch through the door.
the thing is if you can teach kids that are 5 years old, I've taught them as young as 3. Usually the attention span's not long enough. But if you can teach children that young, you can teach anybody. So in the same day, I would go from teaching 5 to 10-year-olds to later that night, I'm training, a room full of, 40 guys that are in the top 10 in the world. And it was the same thing. It was literally the same thing. I have to be able to explain things clearly to a 5-year-old so that they understand them. I have to show them correctly how to do it correctly. Sometimes I have to mold their body like clay to be able to do it correctly. And then when I get to a guy who's, a D1 All-American who's trying to learn how to box, I've got to be able to do the same thing with him and explain things and show him, because some people are verbal, some people are visual, it just depends on how they learn. And you've got to recognize that. And you also have to recognize the personality of the person. There's some people that are motivated by getting yelled at if it's a fighter. There's others that that day they just need a hug.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got to be able to recognize where people have their strengths and weaknesses as a personality, that sort of stuff, encourage them, or chew their ass if they need it.
Yeah, 5-year-olds don't like getting their ass chewed.
It's funny. I never really yelled at kids, but a guy that ran the swim club here in town, he was an 11-year Navy SEAL, great guy, great family guy, family man, but he's very intense. And he would yell at the kids in swim practice and the windows of the pool would shake when he'd yell at them. And there wasn't a single mom on that team that didn't cry to their husband, God, I can't believe he's yelling at our kid, like that, and yelling at the kids. And I go, he's showing that he cares. Like, that's just how he does things.
Mm-hmm.
He's pretty rough around the edges, but he's showing that he actually cares, right? And he was an intense personality, and he and I, even had a couple fallings out, disagreements, arguments, because he was pretty intense personality, and I'm of course gonna butt heads with somebody like that now and then, but we were good friends. And one time he asked me about coaching, and I mentioned that. I said, you got to read kids differently. Kids have different personalities, and you got to kind of mold things around them. And he goes, he just got done asking me for advice. He goes, Dad, he goes, that's not the way we did it in the teams. I'm not doing that.
That's funny.
But my kids, dude, at a very young age, my kids could swim for miles and miles and miles without stopping. 8-year-old, 10-year-old, they're 2 years apart. Their grandfather said to him, he's from Montreal, Canada, strong French accent, says, girls, you do laps at their pool, at their condo down in Florida. He goes, you guys do laps, I'll pay you $5 for every lap that you do. And I said, Maurice, you don't want to do that. You really don't want to do that. He goes, no, it's fine. Yeah, let them have fun, let them make some money. I had to force my girls to stop swimming. I don't know, was it a couple hours later, and
they got hundreds of dollars.
Oh, like close to $2,000. They just kept swimming and swimming. Like,
did he not realize what they were capable of?
Had no idea. They're little children, right?
He thought he was going to pay $10 or something.
Yeah, he didn't realize that these kids were trained by a Navy SEAL since they were 5.
That's funny.
Yeah, so
that's
funny. I mean, my kids, God bless them. They're independent thinkers. They think for themselves. They have no problem giving me shit if they'll call me out on stuff. One's 19 in college at the university down in Florida. The other one's a senior at the high school here in town, and they will absolutely call me out at any time. They'll call their mother out at any time. They'll stand up to anybody. That's just the way they are, and I love it. And so that's the kind of kids you want. You want, that old saying. I had somebody talking to me the other day, and they said, respect your elders thing. No, absolutely not. I don't want my kids to live by that creed unless the elder earns the respect, right? Because there's a lot of bad people in this world. I
dig that.
And I don't want my kid. And I said, dude, you're spot on. And that's the way I've raised my kids. It's, this can be a very ugly world if you can find yourself in real tough situations if you expose yourself to those, or sometimes, can come visit you. So, if something seems off, get away from them. Get the hell away from them.
I agree.
So that's important, and that's kind of a credo that my kids were raised by, and they're very aware of things that can happen in this world.
That's another one of those dogmas that we just say is okay because that's what we were told.
Yeah, and you wonder who started that saying.
An old person. Hey man, I appreciate you taking the time to jump on here. I normally will end a podcast by saying, what is something you would leave people with if they never heard from you again, never saw you, never met you? What would you leave?
Just that I guess, in everything that I was passionate about, I truly cared. I cared about people and wanted them to be their best. And hopefully I inspired a few people to do great things in their life. And no matter what situation in life they were in, we've all been in tough situations and have had to battle our way out of them. Right. And, just keep throwing punches, because you can't score knockouts if you quit punching. Keep
throwing punches. I dig it. I appreciate you. You guys that have listened and viewed today, if you don't know who Pat is, just punch his name into the Google and you'll find hundreds of videos and podcasts and all kinds of stuff. You'll see fight footage and all kinds of good stuff that he's pumped out over the years. How do people find? Go ahead.
Oh, people can find me at PJ Miletich on Instagram, and they can go to theconspiracyfarm.com. or our podcast. I recommend people listen to episode 150 first, so that they get a grip on what's going on in the world today. And I'm actually going to start a YouTube channel here pretty soon for self-defense. And then most of my main content will be on the app called Rockfin, ROKFIN. I'm starting that with a good buddy of mine who's the tech guru, Jason Burmas, who's an incredible podcaster himself. He's very knowledgeable. BERMAS, Jason Burmas on Rockfin. And people will get a little bit of an education on the world from that guy. He's been doing that for over 20 years.
Very cool. I dig it. The rest of you guys, don't be dickheads.
Visit our website, CarryTrainer.com, for information about classes held throughout the U.S., CarryTrainer apparel, and upcoming projects. You can also email us at training@CarryTrainer.com for information about setting up your own private course or speaking engagement. Training@CarryTrainer.com or CarryTrainer.com.
I said I got me some gunfighter gun law. Gunfighter gun law, baby. Gunfighter gun law, no more gunfighter blues. Made in the USA, amazing lubricity, 100% synthetic, baby. So it's gonna last you longer. So go on CarryTrainer.com and order yourself some gunfighter gun or gunfighter lube to get rid of your gunfighter blues. I said go on and order yourself some gunfighter